Good morning. It is Wednesday, March 11th, 2026. And if you woke up today thinking it was going to be just another regular Tuesday, think again. Because as of this morning, right now, something is unfolding on the other side of the world that is already sending shockwaves through energy markets, rattling governments from Washington to Riyadh to Beijing, and is headed straight for your front door. Oil has crossed $120 per barrel. Gas prices across the United States are already ticking up. And the reason behind all of it is one narrow strip of water, 21 miles wide at its tightest point, called the Strait of Hormuz. Iran has moved to shut it down, and the world is in full panic mode. I want to be straight with you right from the top. This is not speculation. This is not fear-mongering. This is not a worst-case scenario being modelled in some Washington think tank. What is happening at the Strait of Hormuz right now is real. It is fast-moving. And the consequences for everyday Americans, your gas prices, your grocery bill, your 401k, your heating costs, every single thing you buy that gets shipped in a truck or a plane are going to be significant. So, buckle up. We are going to walk you through the entire picture this morning, what the Strait of Hormuz actually is, why Iran is doing this, what it means for oil prices, and most importantly, what it means for you here in the United States. We are going to give you everything, no spin, no fluff, just the full story. Let us start with the basics, the Strait of Hormuz. Most Americans hear that name and maybe vaguely remember it from a headline somewhere. But here is what you need to understand. This is not just some body of water in the Middle East. This is the single most critical choke point in the entire global energy supply. Period. It is a narrow waterway tucked between Iran to the north and the United Arab Emirates and Oman to the south. It connects the Persian Gulf, where the majority of the world's biggest oil producers are located, to the open ocean. Every single day, approximately 21 million barrels of crude oil move through that strait. 21 million barrels. Every single day. That is roughly 20% of the entire world's daily oil consumption. 1 out of every 5 barrels of oil that powers the global economy. That heats American homes, fuels American jets, gets refined into the gasoline you pump into your car every week, travels through a channel that is 21 miles across at its narrowest point. Saudi Arabia's oil exports go through there. Iraq's oil goes through there. Kuwait, Qatar, the United Arab Emirates. All of them depend on the Strait of Hormuz staying open to get their product to global markets. And here is the part that should make every American sit up straight. There is no real backup plan. The pipelines that exist in the region can handle only a small fraction of that daily volume. The alternate shipping routes are longer, slower, and far more expensive. If the Strait of Hormuz goes dark, the world's oil supply does not get rerouted. It gets cut. And what gets cut at the global energy artery bleeds directly into your bank account. Now let us talk about Iran, because to understand why this is happening today, this morning, March 11th, 2026, you need to understand Iran's relationship with this waterway. Iran sits on the northern coast of the Strait of Hormuz. Its territorial waters cover the northern half of the passage. Iranian naval bases, missile batteries, and fast attack boat fleets are positioned directly along that coastline with a clear line of sight to every single tanker that moves through. For decades, Iran has used this geographic reality as its most powerful card in international negotiations. Iranian military commanders and political leaders have said it publicly over and over. If you push us far enough, we will close the strait. If you sanction us into a corner, we will shut the artery. If the United States or Israel strikes our nuclear facilities, we will make every tanker captain in the Persian Gulf think twice before moving an inch. They have rehearsed it with military exercises. They have war-gamed it. They have built their entire deterrence strategy around the credibility of that threat. And now, for the first time in modern history, they are not just threatening, they are doing it. This morning, the threat became action. Here is what we know as of this hour. In the past 72 hours, Iranian naval forces, specifically units of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy, which is the hardline naval branch that operates independently of Iran's conventional military, have dramatically escalated their presence throughout the Strait of Hormuz. Fast attack boats, in numbers not seen in years, are swarming international shipping lanes. Iranian forces have fired warning shots near at least 2 commercial tankers that attempted to transit the strait. One of those tankers, flagged to a European nation loaded with crude oil bound for Asian markets, turned back. It did not pass through. The captain made the call that the risk was too high. A second tanker was briefly boarded by Iranian forces before being released. Tehran called it a routine inspection. The shipping company that owns that vessel called it an act of piracy on international waters. And Lloyd's of London, the global insurance market that underwrites the vast majority of commercial shipping on this planet, has sharply raised its war risk premiums for any vessel transiting the Persian Gulf. That last point is not symbolic. When Lloyd's of London raises war risk premiums, ships stop moving, period. The math becomes too expensive. The liability becomes too high. When ships stop moving, oil stops flowing. And when oil stops flowing, you are going to feel it, here, at home, today. The market response this morning has been exactly what every energy economist who has ever run a Hormuz closure scenario has feared. Oil prices exploded. Brent crude, the international benchmark, crossed $120 per barrel within hours of the first confirmed reports of Iranian military activity in the Strait. West Texas Intermediate, the American benchmark that most directly influences what you pay at the pump, followed close behind. Some analysts at major trading houses are already publicly putting price targets of $140, $150 per barrel on the table if this closure holds. To put that in context, when oil hit $147 per barrel back in the summer of 2008, Americans were paying over $4 per gallon at the national average. Some states were paying closer to $5. And that was before today's inflation, before today's cost of living pressures, before everything else American families are already dealing with. If oil sustains at $120 or climbs higher from here, what you are going to experience at the pump and in your entire household budget is going to be sharp, and it is going to come fast. Let us get specific about what this means for you, the American consumer, sitting right here this morning on March 11th. Gas prices are the most immediate, most visible hit. The relationship between crude oil prices and what you pay at the gas station is not perfectly one-to-one. There are refining costs, distribution costs, state taxes, and retailer margins built in. But as a general rule, every $10 rise in the price of a barrel of crude translates to roughly 20 to 25 cents more per gallon at the pump. And fuel prices, as every American driver knows all too well, have a nasty habit of rising fast and falling slow. If crude sustains at $120 per barrel or climbs further, which analysts say is possible if this closure holds, you should expect to see pump prices move meaningfully higher within days, not weeks. If you are driving a big truck or an SUV, if you have a long commute, if you run a small business with any kind of vehicle or delivery component, this is your bottom line right now. But here is the part that people who do not follow energy markets closely often miss. Gasoline is only the beginning of how this hits you. Energy is baked into the price of virtually everything you buy. The food on your kitchen table required fuel to plant, to harvest, to refrigerate, to transport in a truck, and to stock on a store shelf. The clothes you are wearing required energy at every step of the manufacturing and shipping process. The medications in your medicine cabinet, the appliances in your kitchen, the building materials in the home or apartment you live in, all of it has energy embedded in its cost at multiple stages. When oil prices spike dramatically and suddenly, it acts like a tax on everything in the economy simultaneously. Inflation does not need much of a shove to start climbing again, and a supply shock of the kind that a sustained Strait of Hormuz closure could produce is one of the most powerful inflationary forces that exists in the modern global economy. The Federal Reserve is going to face a nightmare scenario: raise interest rates to fight inflation and risk pushing the economy into recession, or hold steady and let inflation run. Neither choice is painless. Neither choice leaves American families untouched. Now, let us pull back and look at the broader picture, because what is happening today did not come out of nowhere. There is a chain of events that led here: months of escalation, failed negotiations, and decisions made in Tehran that have been building toward this moment. The relationship between Iran and the United States has been deteriorating steadily and significantly. Sanctions on Iranian oil exports have been tightened. Negotiations over Iran's nuclear program have completely stalled. There is no active diplomatic process happening right now, no framework, no back channel that anyone is publicly acknowledging. Meanwhile, Iranian-backed proxy forces in Yemen, in Iraq, in Lebanon have been increasingly active, targeting American assets and American allies in the region. Iran has felt, according to multiple former diplomats and regional analysts who have been closely watching, increasingly cornered. And here is what history teaches us about nations that feel cornered, particularly nations whose leadership ties its own political survival to projecting strength and resolve to a domestic audience. Cornered nations make moves that more stable, more secure governments would never make. Closing the Strait of Hormuz is Iran's ultimate escalation card. It is Tehran saying to Washington, to Riyadh, to the entire international community, "You want to squeeze us economically until we can barely breathe? Fine. Let us see what happens to your economy when 20% of the world's daily oil supply cannot move." And the deeply unsettling truth that energy security experts have been pointing out for years is that Iran does not even need to fire a shot at an American warship to make the strait functionally impassable. Sea mines, cheap, difficult to detect, historically devastating to commercial shipping, could effectively halt tanker traffic without Iran engaging any naval vessel militarily. The mere credible threat of mines in those waters is enough to drive insurance costs through the roof, to turn tanker captains away, to freeze the flow of oil. That is the asymmetric power that Iran holds here. It does not need to win a naval battle against the United States Fifth Fleet. It just needs to make the strait dangerous enough that the global shipping industry decides the risk is not worth it. Which brings us to the American military response. Because this is the question everyone in Washington is wrestling with this morning. The United States Fifth Fleet is headquartered in Bahrain, right across the Persian Gulf from Iran. American naval assets in the region are substantial and capable. The U.S. Navy has the firepower to escort tankers through the strait, to conduct minesweeping operations, and to deter Iranian fast attack boats from harassing commercial traffic. Military planners in Washington have run the Hormuz closure scenario many times in tabletop exercises. The consensus is that the U.S. military can keep a lane open for shipping, but doing so requires a sustained high-tempo military presence in some of the most confined, tension-filled waters on Earth. And in that environment, the risk of an accidental incident, a miscommunication, a miscalculation, a trigger pulled at the wrong moment is real and significant. The history of this region does not let you forget that. Back in 1988, the USS Vincennes shot down Iran Air Flight 655, killing 290 people in exactly this kind of high-pressure, high-tension Persian Gulf environment where mistakes happen before anyone has a chance to stop them. Nobody in the Pentagon wants a replay of that. Nobody in the White House wants to explain how a routine naval escort mission turned into a shooting war with Iran. But nobody in either building wants to let Iran establish the precedent that it can close the world's most critical oil choke point without consequence. Our allies are also under enormous pressure this morning. Europe, which is more directly dependent on Middle Eastern oil than the United States, is in crisis mode. Japan and South Korea, two of America's closest strategic partners in Asia, import massive percentages of their energy from the Persian Gulf, and both governments have made emergency calls to Washington in the last 12 hours. China, too, is heavily exposed, and what Beijing decides to do next is one of the most consequential variables in this entire situation. China has maintained significant economic ties with Iran even through the toughest periods of Western sanctions. Beijing has the leverage to quietly pressure Tehran toward de-escalation if it chooses to use it. Whether China plays a stabilizing role here, or whether it sees an opportunity to let the United States and the Western world absorb a massive economic hit, while China manages its own energy exposure through back-channel arrangements with Tehran, could dramatically shape how this crisis plays out over the next days and weeks. Let us also talk about what this means for your investments and your retirement savings, because this is a part of the story that does not always get enough attention. The S&P 500, which is the benchmark that most American 401k plans are tied to in some form, has historically reacted strongly to oil price shocks. Energy stocks, oil companies, refiners, pipeline operators tend to do very well when crude prices spike, but the broader market, particularly consumer discretionary stocks, airline stocks, transportation stocks, and retail stocks, takes a hit. Higher energy costs compress profit margins across virtually every industry that is not directly in the energy sector. If you are invested in a broad market index fund, and the vast majority of Americans who have retirement accounts are, you should expect volatility in the days and weeks ahead. Not necessarily a crash, but meaningful turbulence. And for Americans who are in their 50s or 60s and approaching retirement, that turbulence is not an abstract number on a screen. It is real money, and it affects real plans. We want to take a moment here and give you the full range of where this situation could go, because the outcome is genuinely uncertain right now, and we think you deserve an honest picture, not just worst-case doom or false reassurance. On the most optimistic end of the spectrum, and diplomats, military officials, and market analysts are genuinely hoping for this outcome, Iran's actions over the past 72 hours represent a pressure move, a very aggressive, very dangerous pressure move, but a negotiating tactic rather than a full commitment to sustained closure. In this scenario, behind-the-scenes communication, possibly through Oman, which has historically served as the quiet back channel between Washington and Tehran when direct communication is impossible, leads to de-escalation within the next week to 10 days. Iranian forces pull back. Lloyd's premiums come down, tanker traffic resumes, oil prices cool from 120 back toward the 90s. Markets recover. This outcome is possible. It has happened before. Diplomacy has pulled this region back from the edge before. On the most serious end of the spectrum, and this is the scenario that serious analysts are not dismissing tonight, Iran has crossed a line it does not intend to step back from. The combination of hardline political pressure inside Iran, the Revolutionary Guard's grip on military decision-making, and the depth of Iranian frustration with Western sanctions has produced a leadership calculation that the political cost of backing down is now higher than the economic and military cost of following through. In this scenario, the closure holds. Tanker traffic slows to a fraction of normal. Oil markets go into a full-scale supply shock. Prices climb past 120, past 130, toward levels that would rival or exceed any oil price crisis in modern American history. The global economy, already carrying significant vulnerabilities in multiple regions, tips into recession. American consumers face a cost of living crisis layered on top of every other financial pressure they are already navigating. This outcome is not inevitable, but it is being taken seriously by smart, credentialed people who have spent their careers studying exactly this kind of scenario. Between those two poles lies a wide middle range of scenarios that many analysts consider most probable. A prolonged period of elevated tension, sporadic Iranian harassment of commercial shipping, volatile oil prices swinging sharply on every new headline, and an uncertainty premium baked into energy markets that itself has a real economic cost, even when the worst outcomes do not materialize. And that uncertainty, that sustained sense of unpredictability in the world's most critical energy corridor, has its own slow burn effect on the American economy. Businesses delay investment decisions, consumers cut back spending, confidence drops, growth slows. All of that happens even in a scenario where a full sustained closure is ultimately avoided. Here is something important that we want to give you context on, because it matters to how severe the impact on the United States specifically could be. America today is a fundamentally different energy story than it was during the oil shocks of 1973 and 1979. American shale oil production completely transformed the domestic energy landscape over the past 15 years. The United States is now one of the top oil-producing nations on the planet. That does not mean America is immune to a Hormuz shock. No single country can absorb a 20% disruption to global supply on its own. But it does mean the United States has a degree of cushion that it simply did not have during previous crises. The Strategic Petroleum Reserve, the emergency oil stockpile the federal government maintains for exactly these situations, gives policymakers tools to deploy. American domestic production can be ramped. There are levers that can be pulled. But pulling those levers takes time. Markets move fast. Supply responses take months to fully materialize. In the short term, the pain is real regardless of long-term mitigation options. So what should you actually do right now? This is the question we know is on your mind, and we are going to give you an honest answer rather than a dramatic one. First, and most importantly, do not make panicked, impulsive financial decisions. History consistently shows that investors who make big portfolio moves based on short-term geopolitical events almost always regret it. Markets are volatile right now, but volatility is not the same as collapse. Second, if you have a high-mileage commute or you have been considering a more fuel-efficient vehicle, this news is one more data point that makes that decision more financially compelling. Third, if you run a small business with energy-dependent operations, now is not the wrong time to revisit your fuel cost assumptions for the next few months and build a buffer into your planning. Fourth, if you have been thinking about your household budget and where there is room to absorb higher costs, the time to think about that is now, before prices climb further, not after. And fifth, keep watching this story. It is moving fast. Every 24 hours is bringing new developments. Being informed is your first and best line of defense. Let us step back one final time and look at the truly big picture here. What is happening at the Strait of Hormuz today is not just an energy story. It is not just a market story. It is a story about the fragility of the systems that the modern global economy depends on, and how quickly things that seem stable can become unstable. For decades, the uninterrupted flow of oil through the Strait of Hormuz was treated as a given. It was one of those things that everyone knew was theoretically vulnerable, but nobody really believed would actually be disrupted in any sustained way. The world built an entire energy architecture around that assumption. And right now, this morning, March 11th, 2026, that assumption is being stress-tested in real time. The outcome of that stress test is going to tell us a great deal about the durability of the global energy order, the limits of American military deterrence in the Persian Gulf, and the future of the geopolitical balance in the Middle East. Whatever happens next, whether this de-escalates in days or digs in for weeks, the world that comes out the other side of this crisis is going to look different from the world that went in. That is our full report this morning. We are going to stay on this story throughout the day. Oil markets are open, diplomatic channels are active, American and Allied naval assets are on heightened alert in the Persian Gulf. New developments are coming in as we speak. If you want to stay ahead of this story, not behind it, hit that subscribe button right now so you do not miss a single update. Leave us a comment below. Tell us what you are seeing at the gas pump in your city today. And tell us what questions you want us to answer in our next report. We read every single one. This is the story that is going to define the next chapter of the global economy, and we are going to cover every angle of it. Stay with us. There is a lot more to come.